So hopefully everybody's in. Of course, everybody can always join late. Let your friends know. But we are going to start this webinar. Stuart, if you'd like to turn on your camera.
Sure thing.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So again, welcome everybody to Mobility Week 2020. Things are very different this year. Things are online. In a way, I think this has helped us reach out to more people, to be completely honest, because it's just right here and easy from the comfort of your home. But again, today's webinar is on bicycle and pedestrian safety. Thank you all for coming out, and Stuart, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Angelique. My name is Stuart Robertson with Kimley Horn and Associates, and I'm happy to be here to give a bicycle safety presentation to Mobility Week. I do a lot of work with FDOT related to integrating pedestrian and bicycle facilities into our built environment, as well as providing opportunities for connections to public transit, helping to promote a multimodal and safe transportation system. Part of what I do is related to helping make sure that we're incorporating pedestrian and bicycle facilities into our design plans appropriately per state standards, so reviewing design plans within the ERC system. I also work a lot to help proactively plan for bicycle and pedestrian safe facilities, working with things like the Pedestrian Bicycle Master Plan. And we're also developing a first and last mile to connection to high transit ridership stops with Wabette Hay in the District 4 Office of Modal Development. So I put together a presentation today that focuses on some background information related to bicycle safety. Also provides a little bit of information about what FDOT is doing to further the bicycle environment within our design plans and standards, working with context classification, as well as providing some basic tools and safety tips related to bicycling and driving around bicyclists. So what I'll do is I'll go into the presentation at this point, and then I will allow some time at the end for questions and answers. My presentation, I think, is about 20 minutes, and then we'll have plenty of time after that if anyone does have any questions or comments that they would like to make. Okay, so most of us are bicyclists at some point, whether we are avid bicyclists riding for training or recreation, or whether we are commuting to work or to for some trip on a bicycle, or if we're just out enjoying the South Florida environment with our families. Most of us are bicyclists at some point, and therefore information related to safety laws and tips for bicyclists are relevant to all of us. Almost all of us are motorists at some point, and so it's important to learn how to interact with bicyclists that we find along our roadways. This photo was from an FDOT educational bike ride that I work with the Office of Modal Development and with Wabette Hay and Larry Wallace to conduct these bike rides where FDOT staff and designers and planners, traffic operations engineers can come with us to learn about and experience the bicycle facilities that we have designed and implemented firsthand. Here we are waiting at the drawbridge on Hallandale Beach Boulevard, coming off of the beach, and this was part of a loop that we did from Hollywood Beach down through Hallandale Beach and then back up into Hollywood. Sidewalk riding brings its own unique characteristics that we need to learn to anticipate, as bicyclists are legally allowed to use sidewalks. However, there are some specific characteristics that bicyclists must follow, essentially acting as a pedestrian, yielding right-of-way to pedestrians and going at slower speeds, because of the unique characteristics brought by sidewalk design and how that affects sidewalk riding. So a little bit of background about things like safety data and what FDOT is doing to address bicycle safety on the state highway system. The first thing to know is that bicyclist fatalities are on the rise again. After years of decline, we have seen several consecutive years of growth in bicycle fatalities nationwide. And where do these bicycle fatalities tend to occur? Well, 63% of the fatalities of bicyclists occur not at intersections, in locations where higher speeds and unexpected movements may be a factor. 75% of all fatalities occur in urban areas, and Florida tends to lead the nation in the number of bicycle fatalities. Our ranking tends to be the highest, and we tend to have about somewhere around 15% of all bicyclist fatalities in the United States occurring in Florida. FDOT is taking deliberate steps to address the concerns related to bicycle safety. In 2014, FDOT issued the Complete Streets policy in order to proactively address the safety needs of all users of the transportation system, including bicyclists. The Complete Streets policy promotes safety, economic development, and quality of life of all Floridians. And it includes all projects or all portions of a project life cycle, from planning through to design, construction, reconstruction, and operating the roadway within a context-sensitive system of complete streets. And we'll talk a little bit more about what context-sensitive means in a moment. The next year, in 2015, FDOT laid out an implementation plan with specific timelines for key portions of the process, such as updating the plans preparation manual, the PPM as it was known at the time, to be context sensitive. And now that has become, context has been integrated into the new FDOT design manual, or FDM, that we use now. In addition, a specific context classification guide was developed in order to provide information about how we assign context to roadways that we are working on projects on in the state highway system. So the FDOT Context Classification Guide was first published in 2017 that broadly defines 8 different contexts within our Florida environment. The FDM includes some design criteria that have a range depending on context. So designers need to know which context their project is within in order to choose the appropriate design criteria for these criteria that do have a range. The context classification includes things like a description of the distinguishing characteristics for each one of the 8 contexts. Also, primary measures, which are quantitative criteria that have to do with the built environment of the roadway. Things such as intersection density and block length are all part of the primary measures. It also includes secondary measures for context classification, which are things like our future land use patterns and expected development patterns along a roadway that all play into the context classification. As I mentioned, this document was recently updated in 2020 for some additional information, and all this information related to the policy, the implementation plan, and the context classification guide can be found on FDOT's Complete Streets Implementation webpage. So next I'll move into saying a few words about bicycle safety, starting with some bicycling tips. And the first thing in the upper left here is to always make sure that you're using caution when passing. And this applies for motorists passing bicyclists, but also for bicyclists who are either being passed or, in some cases, passing motorists. If we have congested traffic, it may very well be that bicycles are able to move faster than cars. And so you may have bicyclists passing motorists on the right in the bike lane. it's important to make sure as a bicyclist that we are staying out of a motorist blind spot, or if we're unable to do so, to make sure that we're riding defensively, because we don't always know when a motorist might be making a right turn in front of us. So if we're approaching from behind, it's always important to don't overtake a car unless you're sure that that car is not about to make a right turn maneuver. Avoiding road hazards is another important thing for bicyclists, watching out for things like sewer grates, manhole covers that may be more slippery than the surrounding pavement, and railroad tracks as well, making sure that we're crossing railroad tracks as closely to a right angle as possible. How we outfit our bike is also important. A well-equipped bike will include things like a maintenance kit for light maintenance that may need to be made along the roadway. A good bicycle lock, if we plan to stop and enjoy a nice beverage along our ride, we'll make sure we need to securely lock the bicycle for security purposes. If we are commuting to work, we want to make sure that we have fenders and bike bags on our bicycle that will help keep some of the road grime and potentially rainwater. If it starts raining, we don't want the water from the roadway to be spewing up off of the wheel. We can protect ourselves against that by having fenders on the bicycle. So it's important to have a well-equipped bicycle that is consistent with the purpose that you're cycling for. Possibly the most important thing of all, see and be seen. Visibility is such an issue in bicycle safety, and the lack of visibility is one of the most common factors identified in bicycle crashes. Using reflective clothing when bicycling is the best way to ensure that you can be seen by a motorist. Also, making sure that your bicycle is equipped with things like front headlamps, which are required for riding at night, but are a good idea for riding at any time during the day. And also rear reflectors, which are also required for use in bicycling in Florida. And this is even more important this time of year. You may have noticed yesterday by 6:30, it was already completely dark. And that's just going to get earlier and earlier as we go into the winter months. And so a lot of our daily activities are now going to be conducted in fewer hours of daylight. And so now is the time we really need to make sure that we are that we see and be seen as both bicyclists, motorists, and pedestrians along our roadways. Other safe bicycling tips include making sure that we're obeying all signs and traffic signals. Bicycles must be driven like vehicles on our roadways. Never ride against traffic, no matter where you are riding. That is one of the top safety tips as well. In a shared lane condition, bicyclists want to be moving in the same direction as motor vehicle traffic, since bicycles are vehicles. This is opposite of the way that pedestrian safety works. In a situation with no sidewalk, a pedestrian wants to be walking against traffic. But just think about it. Cars have wheels, bicycles have wheels. They're both vehicles, so they both need to be moving in the same direction of traffic. If you're riding on a street that has on-street parking, make sure that you are avoiding the door zone. And our new buffered bicycle standards take this into account, creating a buffer between the parked cars and the bicycle lane to help cyclists stay out of that door zone. Using hand signals is important as well to indicate to motorists when a bicyclist is going to turn. So a left arm extended for a left turn, a right arm extended for the right turn. There's also an alternate way to signal right turn, because many cyclists may be uncomfortable removing their right hand from the handlebar. And so a left hand extended at a 90-degree angle upwards is also an alternate way of making a right turn signal indication. And then finally, going slow on sidewalks and remembering that pedestrians have the right of way. Even if the sidewalk looks clear in front of you, you may not know when a pedestrian is about to come out from the surrounding building or home or behind a shrub and enter the sidewalk. So it's important that bicyclists always remember that pedestrians have the right of way and bicyclists need to travel slowly at walkers' pace for respect on our sidewalks. It's also important to make sure that our bicycles are well maintained, and this should be done periodically, especially if you haven't ridden your bike in a month or so. Make sure you take time to do a quick maintenance check before you head out. And there is an ABC quick check that is important to remember before you ride. A being for air, inflating the tires to the pressure listed on the sidewall of the tire. This is one of the most important safety features on a bicycle, the wheel being the only part of the bike that is actually touching the roadway. B for brakes, making sure that the brake pads are not worn too thin and that they engage with the wheel as you are biking. You can check this before you even leave your driveway with a few quick pumps of the brake to make sure that you're able to stop the bicycle. And then finally, C for cranks and chain, making sure that the cranks and chain are well oiled and you're able to change gears easily and effectively before you leave on your bike ride. So let's talk a little bit about some of the rules of the road. As I mentioned, it's important to yield to pedestrians along a sidewalk, especially in a location such as this, where a bike route is being routed onto a sidewalk in order to get around a gap in the bicycle facility. Bicyclists have the same rights as vehicles and also the same responsibility as vehicles. Florida is one of the states that does require that motorists give 3 feet or more when passing cyclists. So this helps to provide the separation that cyclists need to be able to have the operating space on our roadway. Proper lane positioning. This one is very interesting, important, and somewhat nuanced. The state law says that bicyclists must ride as close to the right-hand curb edge line as practicable. However, there are several important exceptions to this, which often apply to roadways, especially those roadways that do not have designated bicycle lanes. So some of the exceptions to this riding as close to the right-hand edge as practical include if the right-hand edge of the road is unsafe or reasonably unusable by bicyclists. Perhaps there's a narrow shoulder that has a deep drainage grate, or there's a landscaping has fallen off, palm fronds or something onto the shoulder, and bicyclists have to go around this, or if there's just some other obstacle in the shoulder that makes it unusable, then it's perfectly legal for bicyclists to go into the lane away from the right-hand edge as needed for safety. Passing an obstacle or another bicyclist is, of course, another appropriate reason for leaving the right-hand edge. Making a left-hand turn, cyclists can take lanes and move across the roadway to the left in order to position themselves into a left turn lane. And then finally, and as indicated by the photograph on this slide, for narrow lanes, as defined as where vehicles and bicyclists cannot fit in the same lane. So any lane less than 14 feet wide, which is the vast majority of our lanes on the state highway system. If there's no bicycle lane on the roadway, cyclists can actually position themselves in the center of that lane. And in fact, that's where the FDM now has the standard for shared lane markings on a road with no bicycle lane would be in the center of a lane. So being alert at all times, using bells and lights as needed to indicate your presence, wearing high visibility clothing, and watching out for all modes of travel are all important things to remember. And then one emerging bicycle safety component that we need to remember as we get more and more roundabouts on our roadway is how bicycles interact with roundabouts. Roundabouts tend to slow traffic down, and traffic moves at roughly bicycle pace through roundabouts, which makes it essentially creates an environment that is more feasible for cyclists and motorists to effectively share the same space. But in fact, there are two different ways that cyclists may move about a roundabout. One of which is riding with traffic through the intersection. And that looks something like this. The blue line that just popped up would be a bicyclist merging out of the bike lane into the through lane approaching the roundabout, and then moving about between successive cars through the roundabout and re-entering the bike lane on the other side. That's one way to do it. It is perfectly legal. And another way for bicyclists to navigate a roundabout is to share the sidewalk with pedestrians, and that's the blue line that popped up now. Bicycle lane roundabouts include ramps from the bike lane to the sidewalk on the approach to the roundabout for cyclists who choose to want to use the sidewalk. They, of course, have to ride and act as a pedestrian if they do this, which does include likely some 90-degree turns through the crosswalk network before re-entering the bike lane on the far side of the roundabout. And finally, I just wanted to review the facility types that we have available for implementation for bicycle facilities. One type is called a shared use path, which are paved or even in some cases unpaved facilities for non-motorized users. Shared use paths have a minimum of 10 feet in width, and users on the shared use paths that can be expected to be found include bicyclists, pedestrians, joggers, inline skaters, other non-motorized forms of transportation. Another facility type is called a raised separated bike lane. This is when we have a bike lane that is at sidewalk level rather than at the roadway surface level. Raised separated bike lanes can often be found in two-way configurations, meaning both directions of bicycles are found adjacent to each other, separated by a yellow skip line. In this case, the bike lane is integrated into the sidewalk design in a fairly robust manner. You can see they've even installed header walls constructed here to help provide some visual separation between the bicycle area and the pedestrian area. But we can also have separated bicycle lanes in the roadway as well. And that may look like this, where bike lanes are physically separated from motor vehicle traffic with a vertical element, such as concrete curbing here that's separating the car lane from the bicycle lane. But the difference is here, the bicycle facility is located at street level. We can have periodic breaks in the concrete separator in order to allow things such as water flow to occur, and also bicyclists to exit from the bike lane if they need to make a left turn. Buffered bicycle lanes are the current FDOT standard. Buffered bicycle lanes have a flush buffer space that's designated with striping between the car lane to the left and the bicycle lane to the right. So that flush buffer space is what separates the bicycle lane from the adjacent motor vehicle travel lanes. I mentioned it's important to have door zones when we're installing bike lanes adjacent to parking. Here's an example of a buffered bicycle lane with a door zone, and the zone in particular, the buffer space separating the parked car from the bicycle lane is important to note. This is from the Sunset Strip Broward MPO Complete Streets demonstration project, if you're wondering where that is. And then also conventional bicycle lanes. Conventional or designated bicycle lanes are those that are separated by a single white stripe between the adjacent motor vehicle lane to the left and the bicycle lane to the right. Shared lane markings are pavement markings that can be installed in order to reinforce the concept of bicyclists and motorists sharing the same lanes. So they're meant to indicate a shared environment for bicyclists and automobiles, and are often implemented as part of some type of designated routing, such as the alternate bike route for Sunrise Boulevard in Fort Lauderdale, which is installed along Northeast 9th and Northeast 11th Streets, 1 block south and 1 block north of Sunrise Boulevard. So that wraps up my presentation. I'd like to thank you all for attending and being part of Mobility Week for 2020. I would be happy to address any questions or comments that anyone may have.
Thank you, Stuart. I'm going to go through and talk about some of the questions we had with the registration. And then if you have any questions that you didn't get a chance to enter in the registration, you should have a question pane. And from there, feel free to type in any questions and we'll address them as we happen. Let me pop this question pane out real quick for myself. And we can start. So first, Kenneth says hi, Stuart.
Hello. Thanks for the greeting.
Justina asked, you mentioned Florida being consistently ranked with high numbers of bicycle fatalities. Do you have any theories or insight as to why this is?
I think it's likely a range of factors, one of which has to do with our numbers on a per capita level, because the fatalities that go into the rankings are often done on a per capita level in order to try to normalize each state that may have higher or lower populations. I think this affects Florida because we have lots of visitors, and these visitors drive cars and they ride bicycles, and so they may be adding to some of the crash data, but not counting in the per capita numbers. Another thing is just going to be our weather. We have weather that is more favorable for cycling for more months of the year, and this is impacting the number of bicyclists that we have. And then also I would say that Florida is a state that largely, unlike some of our neighbors to the north, Florida largely developed in the post-World War II development boom, which was built in a suburban fashion. Moreover, that was the dominant mode of land use development in Florida. The suburban development is one where the speed and efficiency of cars and getting around in a car, or in some cases being required almost to use a car for efficient transportation, was what governed our initial roadway design. And so the roadway network being strongly geared toward cars may also be influencing the bicycle crash data.
Thank you, Stuart. And as a follow-up question, Justina asks, do you see motorist fatalities also following this trend?
Motorist fatalities? Was that the question? Oh, yes, Florida is, yeah, Florida does rank somewhere highly in motorist fatalities, but not the same level of almost always being our number 1 or 2 state in the nation as we are for pedestrians and bicyclists. So there does seem to be something going on different with pedestrians and bicyclists than with motorists in the fatality numbers.
Next question, is there any way to request or recommend bike lanes in a particular area? So if someone by their house wants bike lanes, where can they request something like that?
Okay. I would start with contacting the local government in order to find out which agency is the maintenance agency for the street, whether that's the city, the county, or the state DOT. The local government should be able to provide that information. And then based on knowing the maintaining agency, you could put in a request with that agency to consider evaluating that roadway for installation of bike lanes.
Wonderful. Yeah, I know, not recently, but at the time I had noticed there were recently the green pavement markers all around the streets by my house. And I was like, that's a lot of fun. It's nice to see it constantly growing, and it's constantly gaining momentum and awareness. And let's see. Next question is, I've heard word of a bicycle network in the works for Miami-Dade District 6. Do you know of anything similar in District 4?
Yes, in District 4, the DOT has developed a pedestrian and bicycle master plan in order to identify implementation steps for roadways that currently have gaps in the pedestrian and bicycle network. Also, each MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is the organization that prioritizes federal transportation funds within the county, each MPO has a long-range transportation plan that includes a specific bicycle and pedestrian element. So this could be pedestrian and bicycle projects that are both on the state highway system that FDOT maintains, as well as off the state highway system, which would be those local government streets that either the city or the county respectively maintains.
Wonderful. I'll give it a few more minutes to see if any more questions come in. In the meantime, Stuart, this was a very wonderful presentation. There's a lot of information here. I'm not an bike rider, so there's a lot of pretty awesome information that made me feel a lot more comfortable on biking in the roads and biking in my neighborhood for sure. Just as far as feeling safe and making sure that, you know, motorists are following the rules as well as myself. Let's see. We have, at what age is a helmet no longer required for cyclists by law?
That is a good question. I don't remember off the top of my head, but that question does bring about a good point. For folks underneath a certain age, it is required by law to wear a helmet. I'll look that up right now because I can find that information at my fingertips. But I just don't want to say the wrong number.
Of course, of course.
And the answer is, if you're 16 or over, you are not legally required to wear a helmet in Florida. But 15 or under, those people are legally required to wear helmets.
Okay, and kind of jumping off that, do you have any recommendations on what to look for in a helmet? Like, what is your best option as far as helmets go?
Yeah, the thing to remember about helmets is that they are useful for riders who may be somewhat learning or still a little bit uncomfortable on a bicycle. They protect most in falls at lower speeds. If someone tips over or just hits something along the roadway, tipping over, it's not necessarily meant to protect in cases of things like high-speed crashes. So it's important to remember what the helmet is for. In terms of the fit of the helmet, you definitely want to make sure that it fits snugly and that 2 fingers underneath the helmet strap would barely fit or only fit very snugly underneath. You don't want that strap to be hanging down too loosely. It needs to be very snug along the underneath of the chin. And of course, there are very different types of helmets, but all the ones that you can find in a bicycle store are going to meet certain national standards related to the crash worthiness of the helmet. So those are things that are from a federal agency called ANSI, ANSI, that produces standards related to bicycle helmets and other protective devices in all different types of industries.
Perfect, thank you so much. I don't have any more questions coming in at this time. But again, thank you so much, Stuart. This was a lot of very wonderful information. I'm sure if I got this much out of it, everybody else must have gotten way more out of it. But this has been a wonderful experience. Again, I thank you so much for joining us and speaking during Mobility Week. And as far as everybody else, don't forget to check out our virtual rooms at mobilityweek.com or mobilityweekflorida.com. I look forward to seeing everybody at the rest of the webinars. We do have one every day of this week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. But again, thank you so much for your time, Stuart, and I really appreciate you coming out and speaking to us.
My pleasure. Thanks for asking me to be here. Glad to do it.
If there's any follow-up questions, please feel free to submit them. I can always email them to Stuart and we can start a dialogue from there. But again, thank you so much for your time. Have a good day, everybody.